be recording this meeting for public record and it's posted to our web, so that way if anybody wants to go back and watch it, look at it, or go back and part of our meeting. So back to our meeting participation protocol. Each person, both present in person and on Zoom, who wishes to speak will be asked to raise their hand. For Zoom participants, to raise your hand, click on the reaction near the bottom of your screen, says raise. I don't think you have anybody doing phone audio, but if you are, you will press star button and 9. Need technical support, please message us in the chat. My coworker Amber will be monitoring the chat. And if you're on Zoom, please keep your mic muted unless it's and that we not have side conversations. So that way everybody can hear what's going on. And then we'll call on members in the order in which hands are raised. We ask that all participants be respectful of each other and the DSL participants. Any questions so far? Our rulemaking process. So in general, for our rulemaking process, we establish a need for rulemaking and proposed rule language is drafted.
Hold on, the first slide changed.
Oh. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Amber. For our rulemaking process, we establish our need for our rules and the rule language is drafted. And then we convene a rulemaking advisory committee, which is what we're doing here today. And the draft language is reviewed and approved. The draft need for the rules, the fiscal impact statement, and the racial equity statement are reviewed and approved. And then once we finalize that, we will publish a notice of proposed rulemaking in the Secretary of State's Oregon Bulletin. And that'll be we're aiming for May 1st for that publication. And we'll send out public notice once that is published. Yeah. And then once we have our publication of the notice of proposed rulemaking, we have a public comment period, which will be open for 30 days following that publication. And then we'll have a public rule hearing generally 15 days after the notice is published, but this public rule hearing will be towards the end of May to accommodate staff schedule. And we will present the proposed rule language after our public comment period. We'll propose it to the state land board for final approval. There are some rules that go to our executive director, but this rule specifically will be going to the state land board for approval. And once we have approved rule language, we'll file it with the Secretary of State to adopt it permanently. And we will send out public notice that the rule has been adopted. Any questions about the rulemaking process? Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to go through, and this is kind of a lengthy bit, but our RAC operating principles. So if there are questions while I'm speaking, go ahead and raise your hand. That way I don't have to stop and ask like after every slide if there are any questions. Okay. So the duties and responsibilities of the RAC members are to advise the department on proposed rule language. The group is an advisory board, and the role is to provide advice and frame policy choices. Also, responsibility is to attend and participate in the meeting, studying the available information and providing input. And we want to consider a range of issues and options to address them, discuss the pros and cons, and seek to develop recommendations if needed. Members are responsible for reviewing background materials to understand the issues for discussion at the RAC meeting. We did send you out materials yesterday. Hopefully you had time to look at them. We apologize. We've been a little busy with some stuff, so we apologize for sending them out later rather than sooner. We want to work collaboratively with one another to explore any issues and develop recommendations and consider the perspectives and input of other stakeholders and the public and including them in recommendations as appropriate. So our RAC is usually comprised of representatives of anyone who would be affected by the rule. So whether that is, we have law enforcement officers in the room who would be enforcing it. We have local county commissioner who I guess be dealing with constituents may have a landowner, local businessman who could be affected.
and then a representative Oregon Hunters Association, who recreation could be affected by this. And then we also have our DSL archaeologists on the line to provide some input on historic preservation and whatnot. So we try to do our best to get a cross representation of anybody who could be affected by the role.
Do we have, I don't know who's online.
We have invited members of,
Do we have,
we don't-
do we have less on?
Les is not on.
Okay.
We did invite some tribal liaisons, but we don't have them present right now. So the group membership and term of service is at DSL's discretion. I skipped ahead of myself on the slide. The membership is intended to represent a diversity of expertise, skill sets, and viewpoints. And members may be represented by alternates and must provide notice to the roles coordinator. This is more so, that bullet's more so if we have multiple RAC meetings, larger rulemaking projects. So the department role is to provide technical and administrative support, information, institutional knowledge and expertise, and advice to the RAC. We're responsible for scheduling the meetings, preparing meeting summaries, and maintaining a public record of the RAC process. And the role of the facilitator, I will be acting as facilitator today. It'll be the responsibility of the facilitator to ensure a safe and welcoming environment where all members can participate, conduct meetings to foster collaborative decision-making and consensus building, distribute meeting summaries that outline the topics discussed, the areas where there is agreement, and any remaining issues on which agreement was not reached. The facilitator will not act as an advocate on behalf of any issue, interest group, or member. And while the facilitator may make recommendations regarding the process, they will not make any substantive decisions. Information disclosed in confidence will be kept confidential by the facilitator, though written communications may be subject to public records law. And if you need my contact information, I have left business cards at the front of the room. RAC members are encouraged to approach the facilitator if and when procedural issues arise. So our operating procedure protocols. Members agree to act in good faith through all aspects of the RAC process. Again, attend all meetings if we were having more than one. Direct any requests for information made outside of meetings to the designated contacts. Be respectful of other members, interested parties, staff, and members of the public, and make every effort to address their concerns with the group. Members agree to ensure any written communications regarding the RAC or rulemaking process are mindful of these procedural ground rules and are respectful even if highlighting different perspectives. Generally defer to DSL for all media communications related to the group's process and recommendations, and represent only their own perspective in interviews unless otherwise discussed with the group or DSL, and raise all concerns, especially those being discussed for the first time at RAC meetings and not in or through the media. So a consensus model will be used to facilitate decision-making and ensure the RAC benefits from the individual views, experiences, background, training, and expertise of the members. Consensus is a participatory process where the RAC members strive for recommendations that they can accept, support, live with, or agree not to oppose. Expectations for the decision-making process include members agree on the value of consensus. The group should strive to achieve it. As such, recommendations will be made by consensus of all present members. Members agree to compromise and work together to find workable solutions in the commitment to achieving consensus. Those with differing recommendations are responsible for proposing alternative solutions or approaches to resolve differences. Meetings will be conducted in a way that fosters collaborative decision-making and consensus building. Members will honor decisions made and avoid reopening issues once resolved. When consensus cannot be reached, the facilitator may invite documentation of differing opinions or viewpoints. So public meetings and records. RAC meetings are considered public meetings and are open to the public. RAC members are advised that all rulemaking records, including formal documents, rule drafts, meeting summaries, and exhibits, Meeting recordings and communications are public records and may be released in response to a public records request. In general, we do post all of our rulemaking documents to our website for transparency. Communications refers to all statements and votes made during meetings, memoranda, work projects, emails, and correspondence, and documents or materials developed to fulfill the goals of rulemaking. So we do have interested parties on the line. Interested parties are non-voting meeting attendees. They're invited to observe, but not permitted to participate during RAC member discussion. They are able to provide a timed comment as time allows after RAC members have concluded business. We have set aside time on the agenda to allow any interested parties to make comments. At a later date, after the RAC process has concluded, DSL will invite public comments on the proposed rules and will hold a public hearing prior to consideration and adoption. All right, that's it for my part. Any questions about your role on the RAC? Pretty clear. I mean, that was a lot. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and Sean, just let me know when you need a slide advanced.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So it's what is in there.
Yeah, I got it. Say, so is it like line by line all the way?
Pretty
That's
much,
what's on there? Perfect.
You'll have to speak up a bit.
Yeah, again, I really say thank you to you all for making it here. I know it takes time out of your day, and just it's a big issue, and you know, in the future, you'll probably have more opportunity to kind of look at this. As you said, there's gonna be a public hearing. So there'll be more opportunity to kind of be involved after this portion of the rule is kind of developed. But I just kind of want to go into the need for this rule, which I know many of you probably are aware of. But essentially, like a lot of this says, just over the course of the years, you know, I know back in 2014, we started doing the emergency rules for Crump Lake specifically because of issues with cultural archaeological resources being looted, some defacement even on, you know, there's federal land right around there that has a lot of petroglyphs and stuff like that that has been spray painted, and that's become a big issue. And then we've also got some natural resource disturbances and people driving along and what is a lake bed and creating additional disturbances on the a natural resource environment. So we went through emergency rules multiple times, like I said, starting in 2014. We've got a current emergency rule in place as of August of 2022.
Just a bit of correction. It's an emergency closure.
Emergency closure.
Yeah, it hasn't gone through a
Excuse me.
rulemaking process.
Yes.
It's an emergency closure, which is
So-
approved by our executive director.
Yeah, so there is a difference. It's not a rule. It's not something that goes through the Secretary of State's office. It's something our director enacts because there's an emergency, there's a need for it to be dealt with right now. And it's essentially in place until but this Band-Aid approach, constantly putting this emergency rule in place when we think it's going to not be an issue. We just want to put this in permanent rule so that we can always have a rule in place when water is low enough to where people can go out there, their vehicles and their buckets and their shovels and digging up those cultural resources that are, you know, that are out there. We don't even know the extent, but we know there's a lot. And I'm sure, you know, anybody here could go on eBay and look up Crump Lake artifacts and they can find arrowheads found in Crump Lake. You know, I did it the other day. I was shocked to find what see what I saw. So that's, you know, that's the essential need for these rules, is to kind of prevent those issues, allow law enforcement officers to kind of help regulate that, and give them some teeth. So that's where this is going to, you know, play a huge part, and then you guys all being involved and helping and kind of advise us how these rules should read. We have a good draft that's started here. We can start there and kind of work through that process and kind of, I mean, this is meant to be a very inclusive endeavor, and we're not just trying to like dictate to you guys. This is, you know, it seems like a very formal meeting, and it is formal, but it's an opportunity for us to actually come together as a group, kind of come up with some rules that are going to make it work for everybody the best we can. So what do you have on the next slide?
I believe that the next slide is our draft rule language.
Perfect. We can just start looking at the draft rule. and just kind of dive into this, and I'll read off what it says. and
Did
kind of-
everybody get a handout?
Did you all get, I don't think you all got one. I know I sent these, that's what I sent you. in email.
In an email form, I have.
I'll give you a hard copy, yeah, just so you have it.
So what's on the hard copy that Sean's distributing and what was sent out via email is what is up on the screen. And if we want to make edits to it, I'll pull up a Word document for that and we can do edits in real time.
Thank you. Oh,
Okay, let's start out with so this will be under 141-088-0250. It's the newest rule to our, essentially like our public lands rules. So this would be restrictions for state-owned property on Crump Lake in Lake County. It'll affect all state-owned lands under the jurisdiction of the Oregon Department of State Lands that are located within and around Crump Lake, when water levels have receded to the point such that the lakebed soil surface is exposed immediately south of Turn Island. And it gives you the latitude and longitude there, which is 42 degrees, 17 feet, 2.84 inches north, minutes and seconds. 119 degrees, 50 minutes, 38.46 seconds west. Are closed to one, all access by motorized vehicles or pedestrian traffic. Two, the collection, removal, defacement, or destruction of any archaeological site, objects, or artifacts, including arrowheads, as defined by ORS 358.9051A. Excepted from this restriction are government personnel on official business, vehicles and persons involved in rescue or emergency activities, department authorized persons and adjacent landowners inspecting or maintaining fences. All public access routes will be posted when an official closure through this rule is enacted. Okay, so I guess you could just start looking at this and dissecting it, and if there's any questions, comments, concerns.
Is this turn?
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, the map is
Let me-
attached.
Go ahead and advance that. For the folks on the Zoom,
Perfect. Yeah, I gotta remember we are on a Zoom meeting as well.
Is that? So Turn Island is right under where it says what, between the,
Yeah, the map,
oh, the circles didn't
they didn't
move over.
translate to that.
Right above this RU of Crump Lake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
where,
so,
yep,
yeah.
yep, exactly.
Apologies for that.
Right.
Yeah, so essentially the center of that picture. It's gonna show you Turn Island, and that's,
And then between Dry and Crump Lake is Turn Island.
yeah, you can see it. It's essentially, when you see that, I mean, it's pretty clear. And we have, aerial imagery that we are provided that shows us pretty much, within a week to a month period of time, we can kind of see what it looks like. And it's good because I looked at data that showed last year's map, and it had like this is, I think, maybe, and Gary may be able to correct me on this, but I believe it's essentially like a 3-week period from where it goes from wet to dry. So it happens rapidly. So it's just something we need to, as an agency, be aware of and kind of consistently monitor. And we have a contract with an organization that does this mapping for us, so we can kind of see it more rapidly. And then communicate that with law enforcement, and then get out on site as soon as we can to post these when it is closed. So it's definitely gonna be an administrative task on our end to get down there and sign these things. And then we're also planning to do other things with the kiosk, and so provides more information for the community, what's out there. That's something in the future, but it'll kind of go along with just kind of more public information, more public involvement, and awareness.
So this current draft, excuse me, sorry.
No, you're good.
And then, apologies for the record, when you speak, if you could, I missed this, sorry. State your name and your affiliation.
You bet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Williams, Lake County Commissioner. When you say when the water recedes just immediately south of Turn Island, that is at that point is when this rule goes into effect?
Correct.
So is that a linear line south of the
Yeah,
of Turn Island straight across there? I mean,
that was kind of our intent. That was what we originally thought of when we drafted. That was essentially a linear line across that.
Okay.
And it may not dry up exactly that way. So that's exactly why we're having these conversations right now, to kind of figure out, maybe that's not the best language. Maybe,
We have a question on Zoom.
Ryan, you can go ahead and just state your name and your affiliation.
Just trying to lower my hand. All right, it's Ryan Tagg, Oregon State Police Sergeant for Klamath Lake Fish and Wildlife. I kind of agree with Commissioner that lake bed soil surface is kind of a interesting term for me for enforcement, and also it seems like the closure will be in place not when the water's there, but when determined by the department. So I don't know if that needs to be put in there. You know, once the water is there, then this rule takes effect, and once posted maybe, which we can go down to the routes down below. But because if it's as soon as the water surface is exposed, the rule takes effect, and we haven't posted, that's where I kind of am kind of hard on when we enforce and when we don't. I'm open for discussion, but that was my comment.
yeah, no, it's a good comment, and it's a question we definitely thought about too, is like, it's administratively, we have to get down there.
Yeah, it seems like it wouldn't be enforceable until it was posted.
It sounds, that's typical, right?
Jim Cahill, do you have a map that has the public access routes on it? That's on this page.
We do have some maps that do show that. I didn't bring that, and I can definitely provide that. I can send that out to you.
Could you make a note, Amber, to provide in the RAC summary, a map of the public access? Thank you. And then what I'm sharing via Zoom and up on our projector here is our draftable language. So we at this time wanted to make any changes or have suggestions for changes. I put this up, I have it in track changes so that you can see what we would be adding and taking away.
Yeah.
So if you have any suggestions on how to improve the language for the dry lake bed soil
Yeah.
or anything like that,
Yeah, there's some alternative language that we could use for that.
do I need to enlarge this? Can everybody see this?
I can see it.
Okay.
I'll speak for everyone.
Ryan Tate has his hand up again.
Go ahead, Sartek.
Sorry, I would love to be there, but so one thought would be maybe that once the water is completely no longer touching the island, and the island, for those who don't know, is built up of rocks from the Army Corps. So it's pretty much rocks that come out of a flat lake bed. So I think for me, my point of it not touching the island would be that those rocks don't have any water touching them, which I'm not sure how aerial photo close. I know you guys have a good contract, but and the other thing with I think Joe said is all, I would say, designated public access routes, because there's 1,000 little trails that you can go across.
Yeah.
I think that's where that map would be productive, is these are designated routes, they'll be posted. Outside of that, it's you know, discretion of the officer and determination of how you got access.
Yeah.
So I've provided the recommended language up there. All right, it's taking a little while to save.
So
I tried to capture what I heard from Sergeant Tagg, so.
I think in what he's saying also would be the water is no longer touching the rocks of, and just get rid of immediately south of
Oh, yes.
Turner Island. Is that correct, Sergeant?
Correct. Yeah, I still think the southern point should be our deciding line. But yeah, I think the good idea is that we'll have a delay between by the time that water has hit there and by the time that we've posted and the closure's in effect, the water should be well past there.
Yeah.
You know, a rainstorm, it hits the same weekend that the water exceeds, or a thunderstorm can fill that lake up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I like that.
So, let me also show you what it looks like without the track changes, because I know not everybody is a fan of track changes.
Confusing.
So this is how it would look. Yes.
It's a good word. There we go.
Yeah, I like that better too.
Tyler?
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, this is the open, like I said.
This
only
is
if
an
it's,
association.
Tyler Gungan, Oregon Hunters Association. I'm wondering, just seeking to better understand the area, I'm wondering if we have had these same problems around Fisher Lake and areas eastward of the lake. And, you know, I'm not familiar with the petroglyphs that you're describing.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with how far east the damage is occurring.
Sure,
But my greatest concern is perhaps an overreach of closure,
Hmm.
right? That may affect recreational opportunities
sure.
that may be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Based just on the boundary of DSL lands.
Mhm.
Can there be any discussion about that here today?
Sure, I mean, I don't see why not. Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's just gonna be within the DSL's ownership, we're not gonna go beyond that. I just know, like, the petroglyphs aren't even on DSL property, it's gonna be all, that's all federal. Yeah, but you know, one of the public access routes that you take goes right past those petroglyphs here, immediately goes, and you can drive by that, it's on the east side of the lake. So drive that road, you'll see the rocks, you'll see spray paint all over them, hard to miss, and they have a lot of like kiosks and signs that show you, it's a learning opportunity for folks. But as far as like closing it for recreational use, I mean, that's always a concern, right? Closing down public land, it's something that people are getting concerned about. Our mind was that this is essentially, you know, it's a lake bed, so we're not gonna close it from that type of use when there's water in there that's gonna be open for that public use. And, you know, really, the biggest concern is the cultural resources being over and over and over, just kind of taken out. And obviously driving vehicles out there that impact the natural resources that they're driving through. But as far as beyond, like I said, like you're saying, overreach beyond that, I don't. Something we can all talk about, yeah.
Ryan, the State Police, and just looking at, you know, the mapping data, so the SL land with the Crump Lake doesn't extend beyond really, you have Park Mountain, you've got BLM.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, sort of boundaries of Crump Lake itself being within the statute, or the rule, would really limit that. The only question that I would have looking at this now is you've got DSL that goes through the Narrows all the way up into the southern end of Park Lake. Does there need to be a northern boundary?
That's a good question.
And I don't know if that would maybe take a little historical information, whether we have collected issues with artifacts from Sergeant Tag. You have a better idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that that's been essentially Park Lake has kind of been our boundary to the north. Hasn't really been a big issue up there. Kind of why that was not incorporated into this. But yeah, so effectively like almost the Narrows is kind of that northern.
Top of the
boundary.
Narrows?
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, we've stated all DSL ownership, so.
So it goes all the way through the Narrows and up into Heart Lake.
Because that's a lot, and that's
No.
Pelican Lake and.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
Also.
Yeah, because that language is like all that are located within.
No,
and
those are
around.
owned by the BLM.
Fisher
Oh,
Lake
really?
Fisher Lake is on DSL.
Fisher Lake is DSL.
It hasn't formally been claimed by DSL.
Yeah, there may be a little bit of a need for.
Yeah.
It's within your boundaries, huh?
Yep, on all of our county maps, on the GIS maps that we have, it's inclusive.
Really?
Yeah, you're.
Fisher Lake
Fisher Lake,
and.
Pelican Lake, I should.
Oh, yeah.
That's, yeah.
That's pretty good boundary.
Well,
Yeah,
that
that's-
was- Okay, it popped up on my screen, which one, it didn't actually fill it in.
Yeah, because I can see that
Thought
line,
it was
this line right here.
Very narrow.
That's technically.
So there's two DSL boundaries.
For the folks on the phone, we're looking at a map to see what the county information says about DSL ownership of other lakes
Check that.
in Warner Valley.
Because I remember it coming in right there.
Yeah, no, it is part of it. That's the thing. Yeah.
This is
It's
a
a-
running tag.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah.
I would say that Fisher Lake is actually a known problem area for collectors. That's where I catch probably most of them. As the
Okay.
lake is receding, that's the area that's exposed first usually. That Fisher Lake little basin is where a lot of them access and go through. And I would assume at statehood that that was part of the meandering lake. That is why you guys have it. So I would assume everything I've always known is that's under your guys' control. But obviously I know you have your determination process, and I agree with the boundary. There has to be a north boundary, or we include Heart Lake into the discussion, which we have had some problem. But it was with lost diggers pretty much that were out there, but very minor. But the actual, some of the defaced petroglyphs are actually on DSL. That's actually where the case started. That's why state police took it, not BLM or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So there is some of that.
So, I just want to provide a little information about waterway ownership of DSL. So there's a couple different ways we can end up with a waterway ownership. One would be the meandered lakes at statehood, which is Crump Lake proper is a meandered lake, but all of our land in the dry lake bed surrounding it was conveyed to the state through the Swamp Lands Act. So most of that is under our grazing lease is actually Swamp Act lands. I'm curious if Fisher Lake was also Swamp Act lands, because there are cases in which we have sold Swamp Act lands in the past to neighboring property owners. So we will need to do a little bit of ownership research on Fisher Lake.
And we can include that information in the summary for the meeting that we'll provide to the RAC members for their review.
There's some clarification on that.
So one thing that I'm hearing is about, we need a kind of a northern boundary. So I've typed in here
So, yeah,
about within and around Crump Lake, terminating at the northern boundary of.
so I think we said the Narrows would essentially be where that's at.
Is that
And I could
commonly
provide-
known name?
It is, but I will also get the lat long as well.
So,
Can we specify the
capitalized?
narrows between Hart and Crump Lake?
Yeah,
okay, so
and I'll also provide the lat long for that, so you at least have, we're talking about the same exact plot. There's no question.
This is Sergeant Tag. I would recommend a latitude line. That
Yeah,
way
I'll
you
add
could just go straight across and not just a fixed point. So I would just do a latitude.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'm just
And I
gonna
could, yeah, I
make a
can.
comment here.
So Brian, this is Joe
Yeah.
Cahill. Do you have much trouble with people up north of the Stone Bridge?
Some of the petroglyphs that were spray painted is our only case, and I think there's been one digging and screen operation, but no. Heart Lake seems to fill in with vegetation because it's exposed sooner. So by the time we close Crump Lake, Heart Lake's already growing vegetation on it, which that prevents a lot of the surface collecting. That's from my experience, but there could be more.
So for your northern boundary, could you just use the Stone Bridge? It's pretty well documented.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
yeah,
Pardon, Stonebridge?
Stonebridge,
Yeah.
it's a historical.
yeah, it's well
location.
known, one of those, yeah. Yeah, like that.
So we would do terminating at
The northern boundary at Stonebridge.
northern boundary at Stonebridge.
Yeah. A latitude of Stonebridge.
Yeah, and I
Like the
can provide,
latitude
I'll
there.
provide the latitude, yeah.
And that would probably include, I think, the grave sites that are up there. So that would be actually good to protect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, this is Gary Curtis, the archaeologist with the Department of State Lands. I just want to throw in that the petroglyphs that were painted, and there's actually someone that were up there that were damaged by scratching and using rocks on the surfaces. But that's where Sean and I went and recorded the damage that was done to the boulders that
Yeah.
were defaced there. There is one boulder further north past Heart Lake on the northeast corner that was on BLM property that we did not record, but it's just That's where Sean and I went and recorded it
Yeah.
after we found out that it had been vandalized.
Sounds good.
So our revised language right now, which we will be adding in latitude information for Stonebridge, reads as all state-owned lands under the jurisdiction of the Oregon Department of State Lands that are located within and around Crump Lake, terminating at the northern boundary at Stonebridge, when the water is no longer touching the rocks of the southern point of Turn Island, located at this
I'll give
with
latitude
the
on it.
location, are close to all access by motorized vehicles or pedestrian traffic, the collection, removal, defacement, or destruction of any archaeological site, objects or artifacts, including arrowheads, as defined by ORS 358.9051A. Excepted from this restriction are government personnel on official business, vehicles and persons involved in rescue or emergency activities, department authorized persons, and adjacent landowners inspecting or maintaining fences. All designated public access routes will be posted when an official closure through this rule is enacted. How do we feel about this language?
Joe, this is Trooper Neas. What other things other than maintaining and inspecting fences would you do that would be needed to be done?
That's our main thing. There's-
Okay, well, like collecting cattle though, or anything like that? Is there any language we could include in there to help you out?
Well, as a lessee, they're covered by department authorized.
All right,
Yeah, we did add that.
Okay.
okay, good.
So
I just want to make sure.
That's a great question. though, yeah.
For clarification, lessees are considered department authorized persons.
Adjacent landowner might be considered different. So,
Tyler, you
Yeah,
had,
Tyler Dungan, Oregon Hunters Association. I have some concern with closing all of the Department of State lands, even eastward of the lake, to hunting, right? This is the Bayes
Sure.
Butte unit. There's a coveted pronghorn tag in there every year.
Yeah.
Yes, there's adjacent BLM land, but there's a couple of issues. One, there's a way to identify hunters that have a valid tag in their pocket that you might be able to provide access to. They're obviously there to do something else besides damage
Sure.
petroglyphs and collect arrowheads. I personally, and whether it goes under deaf ears or not, I would like to see access granted to those individuals that hold that tag that can take 20 years to draw. There are also, deer hunters in the area. And the other aspect that none of us have thought about here, and maybe OSP can weigh in, is that if someone shoots and wounds an animal that runs onto DSL lands,
Mhm.
do they have permission to retrieve that animal?
so hunters with
With permits.
with permits.
Yeah.
Tags.
Or the hunting tag,
With
yeah.
the
Hunting.
valid,
Valid
There, yeah.
tag.
deer or antelope controlled hunt tag.
Control hunters.
But what about the waterfowl hunters?
Yeah.
Waterfowl hunters as well.
Yeah.
So I've had a number of
With-
letters, excuse me, sorry, this is Commissioner Williams again. I've had a number of constituents, residents of the county, residents of that area that have said straight up that they're at the point, if this isn't resolved, they're just gonna give up their tags, give them back. I mean, they've spent years putting into it, it's not even time worth it to them.
Yeah.
If they can't utilize this for hunting, and exactly that question, what happens if they kill a deer or they make a shot or whatever, and it runs onto that DSL land?
are we talking about landowner preference tags? Just any tag?
Yeah, hunting tags.
General tags.
Landowner preference tags can't be used on your guys' land. Has to be on their deeded land.
Right.
Thank you.
I would
Okay.
say lawful hunters and anglers actively engaged would be the way to correct that.
Yeah.
They're issued a
So-
permit from the state. We can know if they're duck hunters and they're walking around in blue jeans and tennis shoes with a shotgun slung on their back, they're not hunting. Most likely actively for waterfowl. There's been very few interactions during the closure with hunters and fishermen. Fishing goes down as the water level goes down, kind of makes sense. But there is quite a bit of pool if all of Crump Lake's still kind of full and we're closing to Turn Island, that there could be some fishermen that want to try their last little bit of luck while they have water. So that might be a solution that the parties can agree to. And also back on the rocks thing, I think rocks, maybe we should have put foundational rocks because there's lots of rocks in Crump Lake at times.
Okay, yeah.
The foundational rocks of the island.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what about enforcement? How does allowing hunters but not the public, how does that work?
Well, you just have to, I mean, if they're out there doing something or they get called in and they don't have proof that they're hunting something, they have tags.
I can guarantee you will have archaeological hunters out there with shotguns and in jeans and saying that they're duck hunting. That's the hard part.
Tyler Gun Gun Oregon Hunters Association, I think if we limited it to folks with those coveted tags, we would resolve that issue, right? Very few individuals are going to be out there with a pronghorn tag that takes 20 years to drop.
Yeah.
There may be a deer hunter, but
Yeah.
right, it kind of weeds out Joe Blow who
Those issues.
doesn't have one of those tags, but claims he's waterfowl hunting it. And I don't like to avoid covering waterfowl hunters in this as well, but
Sure.
it's a difficult issue. It comes to enforcement, right?
Yeah.
But you can pretty obviously see that someone has a
Yeah.
deer or pronghorn tag.
Yeah, you can tell the difference. You can discern the difference there.
When the lake's receding, you'll see guys with fishing pole on the back, 200 yards of line.
Yeah.
You get 1 inch of water.
Yeah.
4-inch thick fish.
Yeah. Wow, yeah.
And I agree with that. I think more likely it's going to be an excuse and then it'll
Yeah.
kind of affect our enforceability. The other option would be that they can reach out to DSL and get approval if they truly want to hunt a certain spot.
Yeah.
That might be doable.
Yeah.
That would
call.
be very
Is-
appropriate.
Since department authorized three persons, and we do that for TMA closures and stuff, is we give people that have a lawful reason to be out there access. So there should be that process as well, that there could be someone that needs to go out there and study night crawlers in the middle of Crump Lake. We need to be able to get permission, and same thing with hunters.
Yeah. Which we do.
Wouldn't that be a department authorized person?
Yes,
It
okay.
would be. It would be.
Yeah, but we can put some thought into how we would
Yeah.
address that, but we could issue short-term access agreements, which
that's
is
what
a
I was
really
thinking.
simple
Free,
thing
no
for us to
charge.
do, no fees.
So then, okay, so would Amber, you said, and persons with approved short-term access or department short-term
Well,
access?
Yeah, I mean, it would be under,
Well, we've already got department authorized persons.
yeah, it'd still be authorized.
I think it might be good to
Some
kind of
clarification.
clarify that some.
Are we gonna be specific to hunters with department approved access?
Or should it be a blanket? You have a tag, your lot will be there for deer or animal.
Yeah. Kind of that as a separate category.
Rather than having 100 or 70 antelope hunters getting a hold of the department trying to get access.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that creates more
And we
work for the
kind of let
department.
it, yeah,
And I don't want you guys to have to go through that.
So,
yeah.
and I'll need your help with this because I'm not a hunter, there's nothing against it, but so.
Yeah,
I wanna make
control
sure I'm
hunting.
inclusive of both the deer and antelope and waterfowl hunting. So would it end up, would it be in hunters with valid hunting tags or hunting permits?
If it were me writing it, I'll let everyone else kind of chime in, this writing the state police. Valid controlled hunt deer or antelope tags. And I would leave out waterfowl. That's gonna be
Yeah.
for others to discuss. I've never seen any more waterfowl hunting out there, but I've not been here as long.
I would say big game tags, just in case something changes, we don't have to come back in and do deer and antelope, but
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but then you're gonna open up anyone with a bear and a cougar tag, sorry.
Those
And a
aren't-
rack.
well, you don't have a controlled fall. Those
Okay,
aren't,
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Control big game tags.
Big game tag, yeah.
And
South,
this
the
big
South
game-
Central tag doesn't, might include Beatty, I can't remember actually. But yeah, that would be the bear tag would be you could put excluding bear and cougar if you wanted, but
Maybe controlled.
Yeah, cougar not controls, you know.
Yeah, you have, yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, where do you stop?
No,
If it's control.
yeah, I'll think of poacher.
And then,
You can get rid of cougar are not controlled at all.
okay,
Yeah, just be there.
Exclude that.
should it be excluding bears?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, not familiar with the law.
No, you're good, yeah.
I'd put it as
But
bear
this-
for bears. You can only get one at a time.
Yeah, it's there.
We've got another comment. Do we want to specify the hunting unit?
I don't think you need to, because it's not valid if you're not in the regular.
Right.
And it's all under one unit as is. There's no division.
Nice.
I have a quick question, it's a general question, Tyler Dunnigan, Oregon Hunters Association. What typically is this low water period? I mean, I'm assuming we're saying this area is closed until that water rises. Point to the point, and that could really affect our conversation here.
Yeah, I mean, it's typically, middle of the summer through August and.
Hopefully, we're in a wet cycle enough for the next 10 years.
So it probably just got to that point about a month ago,
Yeah,
where the water raised up enough, we had enough runoff.
yeah,
But this is an interannual system. It can take 2 or 3 years to fill up and it can take 2 or 3 years to drain.
yeah.
I've been out there in February when it's
This will be a
a
hot
dust
year.
cloud. So it's not specific and it doesn't necessarily follow seasons.
Yeah, that's why we can't really.
It's really
put it as a seasonal
precipitation
thing.
driven.
And during that same time frame this year, I was out there chasing down folks tonight.
Yeah,
Who were,
it's been dry 7 of the last 10 years, but before that was probably wet 9 of the last 10 for football.
Yeah,
Question, I don't want to ignore the waterfowl hunters. It sounded like we wanted to include them in this language, no?
I think that's kind of where you run into the issues with someone out there with a shotgun or Blue Jays. And they can't really discern, are they actually hunting waterfowl or are they out there?
So there's, and again, sorry for my ignorance of this, do they need a license to hunt waterfowl?
it's the general license most people get with their combined.
So with like a fishing license or?
Yeah.
Sorry, again, I'm from Florida, so.
General license would give them access to a big area that's not necessarily just that. deep. Well, or for the unit, but.
They're not controlled anymore.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so-
a longer season, so it creates more enforcement issues for us.
Could have a license, say they're duck hunting, but also clearly look like they're not duck hunting, so, but they still have a license. So it'd be more difficult to enforce is what I'm hearing?
Yes.
This is a question for the law enforcement. If you're caught lifting arrowheads or defacing cultural sites, what are the penalties for that and does it impact your license or permits for hunting?
The penalties are set under, there's different statutes. And I don't recall exactly what all the penalties are for that, but there is no. They can't, I don't know of anything.
It doesn't impact your tag or anything like that?
You would still be able to go hunt. Even if you got
No,
caught.
The sergeant tag, there's no penalty other than fines and fees. It's a B misdemeanor if you remove anything other than an arrowhead intentionally or defacing and all that stuff's at least a B misdemeanor. Obviously, if you destruct it to a point, we could go criminal mischief because it's state of Oregon property. So it depends on the value that the assessment would give to what damage has been done. So it can go up, but if they're defacing property, I don't think any of us would, mind a stiffer penalty if they're causing a lot of damage. But as for this rule, I would imagine this is going to be a violation of some sort. So it'd just be a civil penalty. There would be no suspension unless they didn't take care of that penalty in court. It would just be like a basic fine that the court could suspend if they chose not to settle this with the court.
Okay, thank you. Just curious on that. Appreciate it.
And that's just a guess on the DSL's OAR rules. They would have to, I guess, provide input on that.
Yeah. Typically, we just go like send a penalty, like he's talking about.
And, you know, this will go out to public comment, so if
Yes,
we hear from the waterfowl hunters, then.
And I think with the waterfowl thing, I think you guys developing a process where people, if they truly want to go out, you know, especially if we have Californians, because Warner Valley is known for out of state visitors to come hunt waterfowl because it's actually a prolific area in the flyway. But with drought, the birds usually don't come, so they start moving other places. But it would be beneficial to have a process where if someone wants to come up for a weekend, they can reach out to you and say, hey, I want to hunt. And then you guys direct them to where, you know, they can hunt. If they're found in the middle of the lake by Turn Island, the water's in the south pool of the Crump Lake, then, you know, that might be where we could be like, all right, what are you up to? But I think that'd be a permit system through you guys. And then you just send a copy to enforcement so we know where they're at.
That'd be,
I'm going to share the penalty rule here. So that I can just show you. Move it over. No,
oh, yeah, something.
I know that's small, let's see. Okay. So under OAR 14108800009, we have the unauthorized uses and penalties. And as you can see under parent 3, in addition to any other penalty or sanction provided by the law, the director may assess a civil penalty of not more than $1,000 per day of violation for violations of any provision of these rules or ORS 274 that occurs on state-owned or submerged or submersible lands pursuant to ORS 274992. So the department can assess a civil penalty under this, just in case, as part of an answer to your question about any penalties.
I have a question. Tyler, OHA, does DSL already have a system, like a check-in system for any of your properties across the state? Because like ODFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife Affairs, there's a check-in process, right, where you fill out a card and you put it in the box.
Yeah.
And that gives you your permit to be on your property, right? You keep half of it, and ODFW might really appreciate it if you put on some harvest statistics. You can how many ducks did you harvest, things like that, but we don't have to go that far today, but it's just a thought. You can hunt this property if you have, you know, that, and then that doesn't affect your workload. But then again, you know, folks, maybe imposters, if you will.
You always have that.
You would have, this is Ryan, State Police, you probably have the additional cost though of someone from DSL having to go out and round these up every day.
And we'd have to make sure that
Yeah,
statutorily we are allowed to do that.
yeah,
Right,
that
was my big question.
Yeah. Yeah, and it may be that it would have something, if we constitutionally statutorily allowed to do something like that, we'd have to go through a rulemaking process to set up that policy.
Well, like I was talking about earlier, I was setting up a kiosk, you know, maybe we don't have a check-in system, but we have more information there. Hey, if you are a waterfowl hunter, contact DSL for further guidance on that.
And that's possible, is that correct?
That's
I
something
mean,
we can.
is that doable now? I mean, you
I
don't.
think that was a conversation we had a couple of times about setting up a kiosk at a couple of different locations along those designated routes. That may be something we can do without, that shouldn't be an issue, because essentially it's us going through our search from access agreements and allowing them to be out there for, you know, a day or two or whatever. That way we have tracks on that. We know who's out there, we
Right.
have all of their information and what they're doing out there, so.
Or you could do an MOU with the ODFW and just pass it off on their responsibility.
Yeah, and we do have MOU
Make that
with
better.
DFW for that kind of stuff.
I can tell you that.
John Muir's not here, so I'm gonna just say that.
Yeah, I know, that was. Yeah, and we have one up in Columbia County that's MOU with Mississippi, that was a challenge for them, they had to have a whole dedicated staff there. For that, so we challenge.
Good, just want to bring us back to our rule language. Thank you for everyone's participation in that discussion. So we've added to the exception from the restriction, hunters with valid controlled hunt big game tags, including bear. How do we feel about that language? Are the adjectives in the correct order?
I think you may get some pushback, from folks that have bear tags, and I don't think that language is really necessary. I really think we should just keep it to valid control deer and pronghorn tags or antelope tags. But Sergeant, I'll let you weigh in on that. It was your suggestion to say excluding bear. But I think with the exclusive language there, you may see some pushback from the community.
I would agree, actually. I mean, I was just trying to save us from like one day Hart Mountain opening up an elk hunt and elk run down on the flat. But yeah, I think with how wordy it's getting, I would say probably just say deer, valid controlled hunt, deer and antelope tags.
Yeah.
Or pronghorn antelope.
So just talking through this, so if we put this in rural.
You can just say antelope, the state knows them as antelope.
So if we put in rule that the controlled hunts for deer and antelope, those are folks that we don't need to give specific authorization because it's already
validated.
So any of the other hunters that might want access could come to us for that access that way.
And that could be, Ryan, yes, state police, that could be some sort of a online form they fill out, could be automated.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah,
And they're issued with a authorization number, which can come back and be tracked back to.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think we should have language that it has to be filled out prior to entering the land that's closed.
Yep.
And it would have to be specific dates and times and no more than like 3 days at a time. You could, yeah, I definitely think that's the way to go.
And it doesn't exclude fraud, because I can't, say
Yeah.
I'm-
yeah, of course.
I'm going out there,
Yeah, you have to
but
catch it back.
it at least reduces the amount.
There's something for you guys to enforce. Yeah, and as far as automated goes, I think we're working on a new system now to help us with a lot of this processing stuff. so-
Yeah, and depending on
Yeah,
capabilities, it might be later rather than sooner that we'd be able to implement a system like that.
I just think of our waterway registration program, how it's pretty well automated. I see this one is very similar. It's almost easier. With this kind of stuff. We review it, we just say, okay, it looks good to us, and then it kicks it out automatically.
So are we good with this language as a whole, as is, or is there anything else in the proposed rule language that we feel we need to address?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good opportunity. I mean, this is what we're here for. Get this figured out.
One thing I thought about related to Tyler's comment on the season of closure is, do we need to define when it opens back up?
It's a good point. Because we're not saying that same level. I mean, essentially, yeah.
No, it's stated in there.
Yeah, when the water hits, yeah,
It's closed when it hits that point, which
Yeah.
means it's open when it's
it's
not.
the opposite.
Okay. Great.
And
Did-
if we have questions about that when we have the public comment period, then we'll know that it's not necessarily clear to everyone and we should revisit it.
Do we want to start to tag again? Do we want to, on the bottom line, all designated public access routes will be posted? Do we want to put something about once posted, the closure is in effect? Or, because that's was kind of my earlier thing is, once it's below that rock, do we want to put an actual moment that it's when it's posted? Because I think that's appropriate.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah.
Where would we want to put that?
All designated public access routes will be posted. Once posted, official closure through this rule is enacted.
the route are posted once posted.
No, that's not right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it-
Flow right.
Will be posted when an official closure.
It's you just change the word.
Upon posting, the
Yeah.
closures in effect.
Okay,
Yeah, instead of when.
so all designated public access route,
Will be posted, and it says
Will be
upon
posted.
posting an official closure to this role and enacted or in place.
okay. I know, okay, upon posting. Okay, upon posting,
Get rid of when.
when. Upon posting an official closure through this rule is enacted, correct?
The,
The official. Is that what we're looking for?
That solves what I'm looking at, yeah.
And Sergeant Tag, what do you think about our folks that live a little north of there that like to tear down the signs? How do we deal with that? Are we still covered?
I think,
Oh,
so I don't think they'll tear down all of them. And I think it's upon posting, but we could do, I don't know, I'd kind of leave it to the local, the commissioner or something, if there's something that he would like to see. You know, because you guys do put it on social media and through the newspaper, but you know, that could take a couple of weeks. But I think we're okay. I think the closure is enacted once it's posted. Yeah, sure, someone takes it down. If we catch someone out there and they're just driving across the lake, we're probably not going to take enforcement action. We'll tell them to leave. So I think the closure's in action from two things: the water down, and then the posting. The posting is more for us to know that that's when we start enforcement rather than the water. And the
Yeah.
water is for the public to know. Once the water's below this point, the closure is there. Sure, they'll read that part and say upon posting, but I think if you have a board, a kiosk especially, and it says to check for current statuses and have a little QR code, they could do that. Or we could post that board and make sure, you know, that there's a way that that board is posted. But I don't, if we lose a case because it's not there and they win, then we might have to readopt or change the rule.
because the sign's not there, you mean?
That's, I think, what Nias was asking, is if the signs are all tore down, is it still effectively closed?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take much to pull a fence post out of the ground on that soft dirt.
Well, and we can also announce the closure as well on the website or through the
Yeah, we will.
newspaper or through any other means that might reach the public.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what would build our case, that it's been closed, it's been posted, and it's been relayed to the public. I'm just trying to prevent enforcement action before someone has had time to really know that it's closed, in the case that me and Nias are no longer here or gone or someone else is here.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused, so I'll just start with a question. If it's closed, the signs are entirely up and and you catch someone out there out on the DSL land, walking around, not necessarily violating anything, but you catch them out there. What's the enforcement action actually look like? Is there a fine for just trespassing in the middle of a closure, or is it, hey, please vacate the area?
So from the closures from the beginning, we've always been educate first. It's
Yeah.
truly up to officer discretion, and then that's a coveted thing for officers. If it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, then we're gonna call it a duck. And if they're out there collecting artifacts, they know better. There's someone we chase off the lake every time, they may get enforced upon the first time. You know, we see them with a stick, we see them with some artifacts. They know better, they might know better. But if we catch someone that's from, you know, Portland and saw this dry lake bed and was like, I want to go walk on it, and they're walking on the lake bed and no clue, I don't think that's appropriate use of enforcement action, and that's a great use of education. But it's really up to the individual officer. But as long as we're around, we always promote education first. Nias can add to it too on his thoughts.
And so far, what we've done for enforcement action with what I've been involved with, we're working on criminal trespass charges.
Okay. So I like the education first aspect, but, you know, I mean, if someone's out there collecting arrowheads and they say, sorry, I didn't see the sign. I mean, you're collecting arrowheads, period.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, if they're out there just walking around though, and they said they didn't see the sign, you know, okay, you might be able to get them on the trespass element, but at the same time, I mean, if your education first, then let's.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
typically what we do.
Right.
And then,
Okay.
and then we have the ability through our system to run a name and see if they've been contacted and talked to about that, because we will document it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear there, you know, like. If someone tore down the sign, but they're out there obviously collecting arrowheads or something or scraping around on the dirt, I mean, like,
That's a case that we actually have going right now. And that's,
Yeah.
and we're looking at.
I don't care if the sign's not there or not, I don't care if you saw the sign, it's your responsibility to know you're not supposed to be collecting arrowheads, period.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we've
Yeah.
talked about posting the archaeological laws on the kiosk too.
Yeah.
So if
Right.
they drive
Right.
by that,
You have the education piece right there.
Right. One of the comments that were made to me last month were, well, I guess this whole tradition that we have is in the past. I said, yes, and it has been since 1974.
Seriously, yeah.
So are you guys within your right to search an individual out there?
We still have to have probable cause or.
Yeah, you'd have to have a
or-
legal exception to the search warrant or a search warrant. And there are some exceptions, but yeah. It's easier to check a game bag for a duck than it is to search someone's pocket.
And it falls under the same rules as drugs.
like if they got a bucket and it's rattling, like your box.
If we can see it in plain view, we're good.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Well, I'm gonna throw this out there. I should have done it at the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't wanna set the tone too obviously. And I wanted to make sure others had a chance to speak, especially Joe being here as a landowner out there in the area. The Lake County Commissioners, we've had some discussion about this internally. We are not for any kind of major closure to that area simply because it does prohibit public access and it's public lands. And so we just have to put that out there. I mean, we want to continue to work with us to get the best deal possible for the constituents and for the public. But we're very much opposed to the concept of a closure in general.
So I hear that you're close to the concept in general, but
I'm
Could
not
you
saying I'm
consent to
closed.
this-
I'm not saying I'm
or-
closed. I'm saying we're opposed.
opposed, sorry, opposed,
Yeah.
apologies. Are you able to provide consensus on this language today?
I don't think so, no.
Is it
I-
something that y'all
that-
can live with,
well,
or?
For one of my commissioners told me this morning that he didn't know that the meeting was today. So I'm grateful that there's going to be future meetings and everything that he can
Yeah.
actually participate
And
in the
we'll-
process also.
We'll have our public
Right.
hearing, we're going to have 2 public hearings, 1 virtual and then 1 in person back in
Right.
Lakeview.
And that'd be
And
great.
that'll be in the evening to allow more people to attend.
Perfect.
Yeah, there may be a little confusion on what this was.
Yeah, I think there was too,
Yeah.
but I want to be clear, I can't give a consensus on where we're at because they haven't been able to review this language at all, not even the draft that was sent out the other day.
Yeah.
so does that mean we have to have another rec meeting?
Well, I think it would just make sure that this gets to all 3 of the commissioners and they have as much time as, possible within the process that you have
Oh,
right
yeah.
now to comment.
So,
Okay.
so I mean,
And-
I think that's that's gonna be part of the process. It's
We-
simply- This is an opportunity, like say, draft the rule languages, how we as a group want to see them can get consensus with what we want to bring forward for further public input.
Yeah, and then another question, Tyler, as a representative of an association, are you able to provide consensus today?
Yes.
So I know in the past, we've had association members who want to go to their board first before.
No, I
consensus.
can do that from there.
Okay,
As far- as
There
far
are
as-
some laws about RAC meetings and
yeah,
participants and their duties. So it's possible if we don't have consensus on the language that we might have to convene the RAC again.
yes,
Does that? And we could do that virtually folks could tune in from a phone or however works best.
Now we can give the commissioner
Well,
this.
we would want, if we have a second RAC meeting, we would ask all of y'all to participate since you are members of the RAC. So we would need a commitment for a second meeting from y'all. And then we would also want to know if you're able to join a virtual meeting or if it's easier, more accessible for you to join an in-person hybrid meeting. So, and then we could also invite the commissioners to attend as interested parties to provide comment. They wouldn't be, because they're not part of the original RAC membership, we would not be able to involve them in the actual RAC discussion, but you
Right.
can represent them.
Yeah, and I'm fine doing that. We're fine doing that. It's just that I think we were all a little bit just confused as to how far along this process this
Mhm.
Yeah.
we would be at this meeting.
And as an
Discuss
agency,
the
we're
actual language.
working on doing a better job of educating the public about what a rulemaking advisory committee is. So I want you to know that we are working on doing that. We've already put better language up on our website, on our proposed rules website, just
What the rack is.
what a RAC is and whatnot. So we are taking that into consideration too.
Yeah, that acronym RAC is used at least half a dozen times and means something different.
Yeah. It's,
So-
it's, one of my goals as the rulemaking coordinator is to work on making sure that we have it spelled out.
Yeah.
As much as possible and not use the acronym as much. So,
Right.
yeah, we apologize for any confusion, but we're working
I have
on
a similar
doing a better
question
job.
Similar to that, am I a part of the RAC?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone
Yes.
here is a member of the-
Everyone here is a member of the RAC. Yeah.
Add it to your resume.
It is a
You showed
commitment
up.
to a public process.
Sergeant Tate has his hand raised.
This, I guess, is for Commissioner James. Is it? James, are you more concerned about the closure? Is that the part that the commissioners are most concerned about?
I think the consensus that I could get today is that all three commissioners are concerned about closure of public lands to the public. In general.
So that would be kind of subsection 1 is the only thing that makes it a closure, really. I mean, that we defined where the closure is and it closes it. I guess for future thought, if we're kind of wrapping up this and gonna have another meeting, I guess I
Well,
could kind of,
Yeah, but section 1 is very general. I mean, motorized vehicles and pedestrian traffic. Is there a third category?
no, I guess what I'm saying is, what's the point of this restriction? I believe subsection 2 is the intent of this restriction. We're trying to protect archaeological resources. There's a little bit of fence damage and that personal property damage, but I guess that would be kind of weighing in on what Mr. Cahill has to say about it. But I mean, if we just made a rule about the collection of the things and left the lake open to include the search for, that'd be something that, I guess is what's the intent of the rule. And if the intent of the rule is to keep people out, then we will push for the closure. If it's to prevent people from taking archaeological resources, maybe we focus on how we define that. That's all I was just trying to bring up.
So
Yeah.
the issue that we've had is enforcing archaeological closure to damaging archaeological resources without closing the whole property, because it's so big, it's hard to patrol. There's different access points, there's not a great way to monitor those, so.
Yeah,
And this is Brian, yes, I can add to that, literally, the only way I've been able to catch people in the act was driving with night vision across lake bed that you're hoping is not gonna turn soupy and bury your truck
yeah.
at high speeds with a flashlight, held out the window in 16-degree weather as your hand is freezing, and you're trying to just get to them before they flee on a side-by-side or an ATV.
Yeah.
And when they realize that, oh, that little tiny light isn't way off miles in the distance, I can hear the engine roaring as it's coming upon me, then they jump on their ATV and try to get out of there. That's the only way you can get these guys, or wherever it is that's out there. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
I was just
Again,
trying to spur a thought onto, if that's what our issue is and we need to word what we want. You know, granted, some of us, just looked at this last night or whatever. So, I was just trying to prompt the commissioners maybe to see where they have issue at on the closure.
I completely understand that what I'm bringing forward is a very general objection. I think where we do align completely is that we want to prohibit or stop the taking of the artifacts and the arrowheads. We don't want defacement or vandalism of private property or public property. But like when we came in here today, we weren't even sure where the boundaries were. Prior to this meeting today, commissioners weren't sure if this was inclusive of every bit of state land that's out there, including north of the Narrows. So this has been a really great meeting for me today. It's been great for us that we can go back and have some more conversation.
Sure.
But we just needed to understand where the lines actually were. We thought it was going to be more discussion. So that's unfortunately, that's why I can't give an actual consensus today.
I understand. And you bring up some very good points about not having the defined boundaries ahead of time and
Right.
that affecting your ability to provide consensus. And so what I'm hearing is that we will need to have a second RAC meeting.
Yeah, probably, but
And then perhaps you could provide some proposed, or we'll provide some proposed boundary language.
We can modify that, yeah.
And we wouldn't be having our second RAC meeting. It would replace the date we would have had the public hearing. So later,
You're shifted to the right.
yeah, so that way it would be, we most likely then, what would happen because of staff scheduling, we would need to go towards the end of May. I think we were talking about May 24th around there. Well, that's what we were talking about for a public hearing, but it sounds like we would want to replace that with a second RAC meeting, which would hopefully give the commission and even the association, landowners more time to kind of review that boundary and provide input on it. And then it would, and I'm talking about from a rulemaking timeline perspective, we would not be able to put this out for public comment until July 1st, because we would not be able to finalize and get internal approval in time to go for a June 1st publication, which means our public hearing would then be in mid-July.
Tyler, I don't think we need to rush this because this is gonna be a high water year.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
And I mean, technically, it's under inclusion.
it's still under emergency closure right now.
Yeah.
So for the second RAC meeting, what's important to me is if you can have a map of these alternate routes.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's one.
Yes.
That's
Right.
my biggest beef is they just they just beat a road across their private land.
Yeah, that's the issue,
Right.
yeah. That's a good point.
is there, would you also like to see us include something about private land, or I don't know if we can, we,
Not necessarily, I mean, we've put up no trespass
Yeah.
signs, but it doesn't matter to certain people. It
Understand.
keeps honest people out, basically.
yes, yeah. Okay, so then my next question is, we're in agreement that we would have a second RAC, we'll have more defined boundaries and provide a map, and we'll provide this well ahead of time. A map with the public access routes, as well for review during that second RAC meeting. Do we prefer to have a hybrid where we have in person and Zoom to make it more accessible? So we would want to have a reconvene in Lakeview also, and kind of a similar setup to what we're doing now.
I would definitely advocate for that.
Okay.
Perfect.
And also a very clear defined border of what state lands we're talking about are going to be implemented with
Yeah.
this closure, not just a general, kind of.
Yeah,
long-
we'll work on some language for that. I think that's a good idea.
Do you want that explicitly stated in the rule? Or just
No,
to
just
look
for
at?
for us to have a map.
Yeah.
Okay, so like a map that we'll definitely
With-
at a
with
minimum post
The
on our
access
website.
roads, the borders to what actually is included within the closure.
It's for us to be able to review here and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Then after that,
And then we can, and we'll have that map for review, but we'll also, have a map that we could post to our website for
Absolutely.
to point the public to if needed.
And, you know, I mean, make sure everyone knows where Stone Bridge is.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have like a
Don't
class
know.
here.
I know there's a couple of us that do, but.
I know where it's at, yeah. Not everybody
I
does.
don't even know if it's still visible.
Tyler, OHA, I think some language pertaining to granted access outside of the user groups we have here would be great to bring to the next meeting, right? We've talked just verbally at this point about granting access to certain individuals that ask.
It's like our short-term experience, yeah.
Yeah, short-term access agreement.
So are you wanting that language in the rule or just?
Not
in-
necessarily,
just-
just to have very
Okay.
clear
That
for
looks
us at the next meeting, similar to the
Okay, right.
values.
Yeah, we can bring what we, like a template, what we have.
That'd be great.
Like what the process might be.
Yeah, just so I can have a better idea as to who would qualify for access. I'm guessing anybody can qualify.
Yeah, a member of the public. yeah.
But how that process might go and what kind of outreach would DSL be offering? Or would it be, I mean, because it would be my job at that point to educate hunters about this, and that's fine.
You
But
just need to be aware.
I would like to know, where you guys are coming in on this.
Yeah,
How much work you're willing to do to provide this opportunity.
sounds good. We'll do that.
So I just want to clarify a little process. So we have interested parties on the call, just one, and they would have time to make comment if they wanted to on the RAC meeting. This meeting recording will be posted on the website. So Danielle, does that mean that the public can?
We did have some other things to talk about as far as our draft fiscal impact statement and racial equity statement. But given that we'll have a second RAC meeting
Be at that one.
and we'll discuss it at that meeting, and we may need to adjust our fiscal impact statement based on this meeting today. So even though that's on the agenda for today, we'll go ahead and shift that to the next meeting. If I'm sure y'all are okay with that. Again, if we update, we'll send that. Even if we don't update it, we'll resend that language out along with the updated proposed rule language. And Gary's raised his hand, has a comment. Go ahead, Gary.
Hi, this is Gary Curtis again with an archaeologist with DSL. I think one thing that is missing in here, and it's probably a minor comment, but we're not just trying to protect cultural resources, we're also trying to protect natural resources that are out there, because a lot of times when folks are going looking for cultural resources, they're tearing up to the lake bed, they're driving in areas that are hitting vegetation, just et cetera, but it's not just cultural resources, it's natural
Yes,
resources and private property as well, though, that in that area.
Yeah, agreed.
And in the need for the rules, which will be published as part of the notice of proposed rule language for public comment, we do indicate that, we're wanting to prevent damage to riparian vegetation, wildlife habitat, and things like that. So we are putting that out in the notice that goes to the public. So we are including that just for reference, so.
Okay, I have a follow-up.
Yes.
So back to this RAC meeting being posted on our website. Does the public have an opportunity to comment on that?
No.
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 So then for commissioner, it would be kind of up to you to get the input from your constituents on their opinion, and same with the association or anybody
Yeah, you
else.
just essentially show them the drafts.
I
have
was
the
just gonna give you
conversation.
Sean's email and phone number. Yeah.
You can always do that.
Um,
But they do have an opportunity to attend and provide comment at the end of the RAC meeting. And the RAC meeting itself provides the language for the rule, which then gets put out for public comment.
Yeah. So there is an official public comment period where we accept comments, and once that comment period closes, we'll provide responses as necessary for that and post that to our website. Like you said, members of the public interested parties, as time permits, we do allow them to provide comment at the end of once our business is concluded. We don't respond to those comments during the meeting, but we do take those, we do hear those comments and take them into account as necessary. What we did do, and we'll provide more notice of it for the next RAC meeting, is we did provide, I believe it's, what is it, the Lake County Examiner, the local newspaper. We advertised the meeting in that newspaper, so we'll make sure to do it further ahead of time for the next RAC meeting in case, you know, local folks want to,
Interested party.
participate, interested parties. And then the other thing about, while we're talking about a second RAC meeting and scheduling, what do we prefer, again, to have it during regular business hours or in the evening after business hours for y'all's schedule?
Yield to you guys.
This time of day is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of doing it after hours,
Mhm.
but, the problem is, I know doing it here in Lakeview, a lot of the folks that would like to give comment are from Flush and Adel
Mhm.
area, and they gotta make the drive home.
Mm, okay,
They prefer probably not to be driving too late at night.
okay,
So, you know, this time of day, like Joe says, is probably okay.
okay,
If you're doing it in the afternoon, it's probably fine also.
Okay.
But people gotta go back and feed their cows and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you for that input. So we'll schedule similar time of day.
I mean, 1 o'clock would be fine too. you know, something
Yeah,
like that.
after lunch.
Yeah.
We
So,
had to work with BLM. Okay, well, with that in mind, I think the actual, business of the RAC, are we good with concluding our business, today and allowing for any, yes,
Just, are you looking at May 24th as the date
around that date,
around that date?
yeah. So we'll try to get that scheduled as soon as possible.
okay,
Okay, so our business for the RAC is concluded. We can now hear from our interested party if they wish to speak. Sierra, would you like to provide any comment?
I don't have anything, but thank you for the opportunity, and I will pass everything along to Senator Finley. He wished he could have joined today, but he's on the Senate floor for 12 hours, so
A little busy.
yeah, just a little bit. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Sierra, good to hear
Yes.
your voice.
Yes, thank you.
And at this time, I will conclude our RAC meeting. Where's my mouse? Sorry. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your input today, and we look forward to working with you at our next RAC meeting.
In the meantime, let us know if you have questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have my email, so fill in a box, like Commissioner Wayne said.
Oh,
And then Amber and I, we have business cards. Amber and I both left business cards over there if you need